Hey legends, and welcome back to the Sim Racing channel, where we're starting to revisit our past endeavors. Months ago, when Automobilista 2 first came out, I made a direct comparison between it and rFactor 2 using the same RFactor tracks offered in both titles. Many people said that it was an unfair comparison based on AMS2 having been in early access and the cars being somewhat different, albeit with comparable performance. So here we are now, months later. AMS2 is in full release, and we're going to use Brands Hatch as our base for comparison with the Metalmoro AJR V10. The car was modelled by Raceroom in both instances, and the version of Brands Hatch we have for rFactor 2 was reportedly based on the AMS mesh. That is to say that the track is built off very accurate LiDAR data in both instances. This should give us a great base for comparison between the two games and their respective physics models in relation to one another. Without further ado, be sure to smash that sub to stay up to date with future sim racing content, and let's just get into it. Alright, so here we are in the Metalmoro AJR V10 in rFactor 2. We're starting off in rFactor because that's my most comfortable game, and it forms a good basis for comparison for everything else. Now, if you don't know, this car is from the Reza pack, made by Reza themselves, the developers of AMS2, and this version of Brands Hatch, I believe, is based on the same mesh from the AMS version of Brands Hatch. So this is about as close as you can possibly compare two simulators to one another. So just with the cold tires, I'm going to take it easy around the outlap here, and hopefully not bin the car as we talk about how it all feels. So the very first impression you get with this car, other than the standard impressions you get with the rFactor 2 force feedback models, you're getting all the micro detail. I'm feeling the curbs like I'm there myself. It's probably overstated compared to real life slightly. I would say that there'd be more detail coming through the wheel than you would expect to get in real life. But the car in and of itself, and I don't know if this is a reflection on prototype handling in general or just this model, but it feels kind of arcade-ish compared to what I'm used to from the newer Studio 397 content. It's very kind of direct, almost on rails. Now I don't know if that's because I've been driving stock cars all day yesterday, and anything with remote control, you know, remote levels of controllability feels like it's arcade, I don't know. But we will compare this to AMS2 very shortly and see where we sit. Alright, so coming up to the end of the outlap, I'm going to try and do my best hot lap under the circumstances. I've set the car up to turn in a little bit more aggressively, so hopefully there'll be no spinning. Not ideal, but it's alright, it'll get us through. I want to see how close these two cars can get to one another across both games. What sort of time differences are we looking at with identical cars, identical meshes? I'm going to leave a link to this track down below for you guys. It's free content, believe it or not, for rFactor 2. It's unbelievable how much you can expand your enjoyment of that game if you simply know where to look. Laserscan Brands Hatch for free, like what? And it's almost at the level of quality of the Studio 397 official contents. It's just absurd. So thank you to all the modders making this happen. You're really making rFactor 2. You're giving it a new lease on life for guys like myself who love playing the game but find other things about it a little bit questionable. Alright, so coming up to the end of the lap now. Let's see what we can do. Hopefully we're in the 115s. I kind of doubt it based on that performance, but we'll see how we go. Come on, sweet 115.
That was a 115.97.
That's alright, it's nothing crazy, but I'll take it. So 115.97, we can compare this exact car on this exact track on AMS2, and that's exactly what we're about to do. Alright, here we are. Same car, same track, different game. We're in AMS2 this time, the creators of both the car and the track, or rather their simulated models, not the real life forms. So the first thing that strikes you between the two is the presentation. AMS2 has a simpler, cleaner, almost more cartoon-like presentation. My guess is because the texture quality is likely lower, or at least the way that it comes through is lower. rFactor 2 goes for more of a flat, realistic look, relying less on the aftermarket sort of shaders and effects, and contrast enhancements, bloom, HDR effects, that sort of thing. But we don't care about that sort of thing as true sim racers, right? We care about what's happening right here, right now. So as always, cold brakes and AMS are a thing. Gotta really be mindful, cold tires are a thing. Both games having physically modeled tires of a sort, perhaps a little more primitive in this game than in rFactor, but still similar wavelengths. It's a car wanting to really rotate in there. I've really dialed in its handling characteristic. One thing I will say is that the setups have to be notably different. I won't say completely different, but notably different to get the cars behaving well in both games, which kind of makes sense given the differences in the two physics models. So notable difference in rFactor, you always go lowest tire pressures, so I went 120 kPa, whereas in this game it had to be 140 or thereabouts, I believe, to get better times. So still a warm-up lap for us here, not going for anything crazy. I am very curious about how close the lap times can get. And that aside, to give you an impression of the feel, the brake feel as we're about to experience in the first corner here is completely different between the two games. You really have to mash the pedal. You gotta really just push it through in this game for it to count. I had to actually adjust the brake pressure on the car and increase it. I'm actually getting more braking force in this game, which is kind of helpful, but not so helpful if I overmash the pedal and lock it up. Again, a lot easier with my Heusinkveld pedals than it was with the Thrustmaster TH8A. Trying to keep my lines as clean as possible so we get a capable, relevant lap. Get on the power, really getting a lot of rotation on power. So the car, unlike the rFactor model, which is very on rails and arcadey, feels like it wants to step out and bounce around a lot more. I feel like this is a more refined version of this car that they never really updated for the rFactor pack that they put in. You notice here is that you can really munch the curb, which you can't do as easily in rFactor. The curbs are a lot more brutal to the car, which I think is a bit more realistic in its part. Yeah, this game's very forgiving under certain circumstances. I think that's partially what makes it so compelling and fun to play, but not necessarily more realistic, you know what I mean? I think anybody following Project Cars 3 at the moment will know exactly what I mean. Alright, we're going for one more lap, try and get it as clean as humanly possible, see if we can get to that 115 bracket that we were at in rFactor 2. Oh, don't understeer me, please. Oh, wow, not bad, not bad. So, the dynamic damping force through the force feedback, absolutely amazing. As we said in our first review way back between these two games, the macro forces, the medium and large forces in this game are amazing. Dynamic damping when the downforce kicks in at high speed feels so good, better than rFactor for sure, but the granular detail isn't quite there. It's really about your own personal taste. I think both are phenomenal. Both are very communicative and easy to drive with. I vastly prefer both, for instance, to ACCs, but that's me personally. I know some of you guys like the more, I guess, quote-unquote realistic power steering style force feedback model of ACC, but these games are not that. Yeah, that curb should really have just thrown me out, but no. Game's been very forgiving in that sense, and I don't know why. See, that curb in this game is lifted for some reason. I don't know why, and it kind of spits you out. I've not had that happen in any other game, and that literally just ruined my lap. So if you guys would forgive me, you're gonna have to endure another minute and a half, or just a minute and a bit, as I attempt to work out what happened there. Oh no, got on the power too early. It's fine, it's fine. It's all good. Hard on the brakes, try and get it down to first, kind of coast around the curb without mounting the curb too much. You know, power as early as you can to get the rotation without spinning out, hopefully. Quite a tricky set of corners, actually. It's what I love about Brands Hatch. It's like a wider Nordschleife. Totally ruined that, but that's alright. We'll see how we go. We'll take the aggregate lap at the end of this. Might notice I'm driving with a clean HUD. I kind of prefer this for immersion's sake, personally. Doesn't really help me in regards to knowing what gear I'm in, but, you know, you develop that sensation by feel after a while. I'm noticing the gearing between the two cars is slightly different. I'm having to drop 2 there rather than the 1 from rFactor. Yeah, definitely a lift on that curb in this game that just wasn't there in rFactor. I don't think it's there in ACC either, so I don't know which one's more realistic. Any of you guys driven Brands in real life? Alright, let's see how we go time-wise. Force feedback really kicking me around on that. It's really good. Okay, so 116.461. So on the whole, I would say that this is probably representing a more advanced model of this car, or at least further refined from what we saw in rFactor through the Reza pack. I'd say I'm probably giving a bit of a leg down in this comparison to rFactor, since, I mean, it's all kind of aftermarket content we're using. It's basically an external third-party version of this track based on this track, and it's Reza's own car model. So it's not really comparing the premiere content of one game to the premiere content of the other. So if you guys have any other ideas of what we can do to compare these two games up alongside each other, maybe comparing, let's say, the GTE cars on the Nürburgring Nordschleife against, I don't know, Silverstone in this, or Hockenheim in this, what do you think is the best, like the ultimate content in AMS2 that I should compare to the ultimate content in rFactor 2? Or should we just wait to do a Nordschleife comparison with everything? Because I'll do that, believe me. I love that track. It's all I race. I mean, you know, when I'm off camera anyway. So thank you guys for joining me. Let me know what your thoughts are about, I guess, the comparison and what you want to see in the future. Make sure to smash that sub to stay up to date with all future sim racing news and reviews. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.